Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Hope and Inspiration Through Goal Setting. I'm your moderator, Kristen Willard, and I'm the Vice President of Population Health and Care Delivery at the COPD Foundation. Now, this event kicks off COPD Awareness Month for us. We're just thrilled, and our theme this year is COPD Hope. We have a variety of events this month and, of course, messaging, and we're making all that available to the community and hope you'll be a part of these activities with us. You can expect to receive an email following this webinar, and that will include a link to our COPD Hope page. We'll tell you about everything we have going on this month, from November webinars to COPD information for your state, from partner activities to messaging for Twitter and Facebook. So just know we are truly excited for all this month holds, and we hope that you are too. So today's webinar is going to be presented by three of my colleagues. We're just so pleased to be here today. Ms. Stephanie Williams is our Director of Community Programs, and she's going to start us off by talking about why goal setting is important in light of the changes in lifestyle, changes in planning, and the emotional challenges brought on by COPD. Then you'll hear from Jane Martin, and she's our Assistant Director of Education, and she's going to help us get started in thinking about goals, how to set a goal, and also how to state it for our best chances of success. And finally, Tracy Sullivan, who is our grassroots manager and head of the State Captains Program, is going to share with us some inspiring stories as well as practical advice. After our speakers, we will welcome you to share your ideas about your own goals and questions about anything you've heard in the webinar. Now, as with our other events, there's no need to wait to pose a question, okay? So at any time during the webinar, just type your question into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, and that's the box you see on the right-hand side of your screen. You don't have to wait to ask the question. Just type it on in, and then we'll go back to these at the end of the call. So we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, let's get started with Stephanie Williams. Stephanie, I will turn the conversation over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited that you chose to join us today. I just wanted to start out with a little bit of background. We had many discussions around the idea of COPD Awareness Month this year and wanted to have this month represent something that gives hope and inspiration. And we talked about ways to get the COPD community involved during Awareness Month, and finally came around to the idea of goal setting. Goal setting is a pretty inspirational task. So you set goals to move in the direction you want to go. You set these goals to modify, to change, or improve your behaviors so that you are a healthier person or at least more mindful of habits. And then we set goals when we need a little nudge in the right direction. We usually think about setting goals around New Year's Eve, right? We have that whole brand new year out in front of us, and we say to ourselves, this year, my resolution will be, and you fill in the blank. Well, haven't we all done that? I mean, I do that a lot. I do that every year, and a lot of times I do it several times, even during the same year. Well, I'm going to change my resolution a little bit. That's not exactly what I need it to be. I'm going to modify things. I'm going to change things. So that's why we decided to have this talk about goal setting and the importance of goal setting. So why do we think of goal setting as important for COPD Awareness Month? Well, the first reason is because sometimes we need to change our focus. We have many people who have joined in on this presentation today and many who will view it in the future. And each one of you is at a different place in your ability to live your life to its fullest, to have acceptance of living with COPD. And some of you may have even just recently been diagnosed, and maybe you're wondering if your life will ever be normal again. Some have known about your diagnosis for a while, but maybe you're just learning about the different tools and therapies that can really be helpful and improve your quality of life. And for some people, it may be feeling a little down because they think of all the things they can't do anymore. So if you spend time or much time at all on COPD 360 social discussion groups or other COPD support groups, you'll find that there are many many people living with COPD who are doing some pretty amazing things. And we want to change the I can't statements into more I can statements. There's a lot of power in your words. So saying your goals out loud and writing them down give you a connection to those goals that's pretty powerful. So you focus on the things you can do. It might be a change that goes something like this. So instead of saying, I used to be able to clean my house all in one day, but I can't do that anymore. You try this. I can get my house clean by tackling little chores every day. Give yourself permission to adapt. And I want to say that one more time. Give yourself permission to adapt. That permission provides the platform you need to move forward. So the second thing is to determine your priorities. Think about what's important to you. What would you really like to accomplish? Setting a goal and writing it down changes that from a dream into a goal. And having the goal set before you will give you the motivation you need to start doing something to move you toward that goal. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Even the most positive people in the whole world occasionally have negative thoughts. One of the things that help people succeed in achieving goals is that they don't spend very much of their time dwelling on those thoughts, the negative ones. Those thoughts usually try to creep in. Things like your goal might seem like an impossible task, or you may have some personal limitations, but there are things that you can do to keep moving in the direction you want to go. It may be that you just need to break your big goals down into smaller goals. If that's the case, then you just make the change in your strategy. You adapt, but you keep your focus clear. So what are your thoughts about goal setting? I think if we're all honest, we sometimes have both positive and negative thoughts about our goals. But personally, when I can see my goal clearly, it gives me confidence and a sense of purpose. And when I formulate my plan, I have that feeling of, look out world, nothing's going to stop me now. When you think positively, you set yourself up for success. I mentioned earlier that each of you is at a different place in terms of living with COPD. And this chart helps describe what I mean. And this chart was created by Jane Martin, who you will hear from in just a few moments. And I just wanted us to take some time to look a little more closely at this to see how it might be helpful to know where you are. So in the first column, it describes issues that might be experienced at each stage, something that people might relate to, followed by the pathway in the second column to help you move forward and reach the third column, acceptance. So let's take a look. Let's look at the category in the first column that's labeled fear. And it says, nobody seems to see what's happening here, so it must be in my head. I can't let this get to me, because if I do, it just means I'm weak and I'm giving in, but still, I think I might be losing it. And then, so the second column here, the pathway, is kind of the steps that you need to take in order to gain acceptance of the stage where you are and move into the third column, the acceptance stage. So what you have here is validation. You realize it's okay and it's normal to be scared about this diagnosis. And once you really realize that that's okay, it's normal, then you can realize I'm not weak, I'm not crazy, it makes sense for me or anybody who has this to be scared sometimes. I am completely normal. Let's look at another one, confusion. Inhalers, nebulizers, oxygen. This is just too much to take in. I'm constantly confused and overwhelmed, and my breathing is out of control. Well, what are some steps that you could take? What's the path that you could take to gain acceptance? Education. Learn all you can about COPD from solid, credible sources. Ask your doctor to refer you to pulmonary rehab, for example. Then you have the acceptance stage. Now that I understand what's going on in my lungs, I know what I can do to make my breathing as easy as possible. I can do something about it. So you can see how knowing where you are along each of these stages, you can find the pathway to get to the acceptance phase. And I think that's a very important thing to remember. As we move through the remainder of the webinar today, these things are going to be discussed in more detail. but let's set the stage for these next portions and think about these things. Changing our focus, using more I can statements and focusing on what can be controlled. Using the chart we just viewed, you can visualize where you are and can follow the pathway to move to the acceptance phase. And then remember, your goals are your own. These are different for everyone. We are individuals and our goals are too. And just think, what new skill or talent might you find along your way? You might learn something new, you might create something or invent something. The possibilities are really exciting. And I wanted to share a couple of real-life examples just shortly. Mr. Spivey, I just want to tell you a little bit about him. Mr. Spivey had been diagnosed with COPD and chronic respiratory failure for quite some time, and he'd been hospitalized many, many times over the past few months and had lost a lot of his strength and energy. Without anyone to help him, he found daily tasks of showering and even shaving just to be overwhelming and strained him physically and mentally. For the longest time, he thought that this struggle would define the rest of his days. But at one doctor appointment, the doctor prescribed home health and a respiratory therapy company to come and help him by setting up some needed equipment and showing him some exercises that he could do every day to build up his strength. These healthcare teams scheduled visits and helped him set goals to work toward. First, he wanted to be able to just walk all the way down his hallway without stopping and without feeling just incredibly short of breath. So the team worked with him to build up his strength and endurance, and they showed him how to do some exercises throughout the day from his chair in the living room. He was able to meet his goals, and he was able to walk down the hallway. Well, that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to be able to do more. So he added another level. He wanted to walk to his mailbox. So the team continued to work with him, and soon he was able to safely make that trip to the mailbox and back without completely zapping his energy for the rest of the day. Mr. Burch is another example. Mr. Burch and his wife used to spend a couple of weeks every year at Myrtle Beach, and they really enjoyed walking along that beach in the evenings. And since his COPD diagnosis and his need for supplemental oxygen, they hadn't been in a few years, but he really wanted to surprise his wife with a trip back to Myrtle Beach. So he enrolled in a pulmonary rehab program, built up his strength, and conditioned himself to walk on the treadmill and on the indoor track for 30 minutes. So he and his wife were recently able to take a trip to the beach and spent some time creating new memories of those evening walks. And then one other that I wanted to share, Ms. Hansen, she was already a firecracker. She was a very active person, and she enjoyed her social activities and family gatherings. But she wanted to create a program in her community where other people could come and be social too. So she created a COPD support group / card playing group that meets in her community every week. So the numbers are small right now, but she has grand goals that other people are going to find out about her group and will come and join them too. So as I turn the presentation over to Jane, I just want to leave you with a little motivation. You're probably familiar with the old saying, a rolling stone gathers no moss. Well, I know it's a little easy to get mossy when you have a chronic condition, but I want to encourage you to get rolling, clear off the moss, and set some goals for yourself. So let me advance the slide one more time. And Jane, you should be seeing the controls coming to you in just a second.
And can you hear me?
Yes,
because you can. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's showing on my screen that I'm muted, and I'm not going to worry about that as long as you can hear me. That's great. Okay. Hold on a second. We're just going to go like this. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Now that we've talked about why it's important to set goals and how it can help, let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of setting goals. So how do you start in order to give yourself the best shot at success? We start out with what matters most to you. It's important to understand that the goals we're talking about today are personal, as Stephanie was saying. In other words, they're all about what you want to do to either keep or improve your quality of life. For example, for somebody who's becoming increasingly isolated, maybe because of shortness of breath, using supplemental oxygen, or a pesky cough, they might be out of touch with their friends. It might be a real problem for them to be so isolated. So it might mean a lot to them to do something like get out into the coffee shop and meet with their friends. I know a lot of people do that. They go to McDonald's and they meet like every week, and it's really a highlight of their week. So that means a lot to that person. For another person, that might not have any special meaning at all. Another example might be of somebody who loves to go to the ranch, maybe ride horses. I didn't have a picture of a person on a horse, but here you can see a man with a cowboy hat with supplemental oxygen who has a goal to get back on his horse. And I know it can be done. I know they do it in California. They get up on the horse and they hook their oxygen up to the saddle horn and they go. So ask yourself, what matters most to me and what is it that I want to do? And doing this will help you get started on thinking about your goals. So where do I start and how do I start? Well, let's start by narrowing it down a little bit. Does your goal involve physical fitness directly, such as a goal of being able to walk around the block, to exercise on your treadmill for more than 10 minutes or whatever? If it's strictly a physical fitness goal, that's one thing. Or does it involve physical fitness or some other kind of activity indirectly, such as a goal of being able to attend a Little League baseball game, which would involve walking from your car to the bleachers, and that would involve being fit enough to do that walk. So another thing to think about, is it a short-term goal or a long-term goal? And I call the long-term goals event goals. One example of a short-term goal might be to go out on a bike ride with your friend or family member. Just get on a bike and ride around and be able to do that. That's a great goal. And this goal would be pretty closely related to improved physical fitness, probably. Another example of a short-term goal would be to work and finish a jigsaw puzzle. I happen to love working puzzles, and I know how happy I am and I feel accomplished when it's all put together. And when I was working in pulmonary rehab, I had some patients who really enjoyed doing their jigsaw puzzles, and it was a goal, and it was a fun activity and a sense of accomplishment. Now, an example of a long-term goal might be to attend a specific event, say such as a wedding, a christening, a family reunion, a graduation. So here we see just some possible examples. A grandpa holding a newborn baby. Perhaps he's glad that he's there when the baby was born, and that was a goal for him many years ago. A grandma attending a wedding reception with her grandson, the groom. We all like to go to weddings, and it's a big deal in our families. And sometimes someone in your family or someone you know gets an advanced degree or a special job, and that's also an event goal, to celebrate that with a loved one. So now that we've talked about some things to consider before setting a goal, let's get right down to business and talk about stating a goal. In order to have the best chance of achieving your goal, It helps to have it written down and be specific. So here's a guideline for writing a goal. Who will do what, how well, and by when? And the first time I heard our physical therapist talk about this, I thought, what? This is like, what is she talking about? This is a lot to say, and all you really need to do is say, I want to do such and such. But I learned from her and our patients that stating it this way really does help, and it's easy to do if you break it down. So let's just break it down, keeping in mind this picture at the bottom of the screen, or this sentence at the bottom of the screen. Who is I will be able to do what? Walk around the block with control over my breathing. That's how well. By when? By the first day of spring. Now, the how well part is really important, especially if you have COPD, because I'm sure you all know that you can push yourself to do something, really push yourself, and you can probably get it done, but doing so can leave you gasping for breath and really worn out for the rest of the day. So the how well part, when you have COPD or some other breathing trouble, would involve still being able to breathe and breathe comfortably and not be totally done in after you've completed your goal. So keep this in mind, and you can do this by using your pursed lip breathing, remembering to pace yourself, or resting if you need to. So the idea is to accomplish your goal and still feel pretty good after you've accomplished it. Another aspect of setting a goal is accountability. You're less likely to stop working toward a goal or give up on it if you tell somebody about it. So who can you tell? Well, tell anyone you choose, but here are a few things to consider. It should be somebody who can give you encouragement or suggestions, but won't criticize you. Somebody who has some kind of understanding about the limitations brought on by living with COPD. And on our online community, on the COPD Foundation website, you can find a lot of encouragement and friendly people who understand the kinds of things you're going through on our 360 Social online community. It's a great place to go. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You could also share your goals with a person in your rehab class, your pulmonary rehab class, your breathing support group, or your Harmonicas for Health group. Folks who are familiar with some of the same things you're going through. Another person you can tell is the healthcare professional who works with you at exercise class at pulmonary rehab. I'm sure they would love to encourage you with a goal, and they understand they see what you're going through. Or it could just be an understanding family member who you know can be your champion and is aware of your limitations. So, what if you're not able to achieve your goal? Well, first of all, don't be too discouraged and do not be too hard on yourself. Then once you decide that you're not going to be too discouraged, ask yourself, well, why didn't this work? Was it just too much for me? Was it too ambitious? Maybe it was. And by not being able to accomplish a goal that was too ambitious, you learned something. Did you lose interest in it? If you lost interest in it, maybe it wasn't the right goal for you. Maybe it wasn't the right activity. We all do better and stick with things better if we like what we're doing. So always keep that in mind too when you're setting a goal. Or was it some other reason? For example, you sprained your ankles, so you can't work on your walking and increasing your distance. And sometimes things just happen that are completely out of our control, and that's the way that is. So again, just sit back, look at the situation, figure out what went wrong, what didn't happen, and then go on. But again, don't give up. And then either modify that goal or start with a new one. Just like this sheep who was very thirsty and he didn't see a pond and he just figured out how he was going to get water and he didn't stop until he accomplished it. So setting a goal can give you hope. It can give you something to strive towards, something that helps either keep or improve your quality of life. And sharing a goal with others can help them be inspired too. And in turn, by them sharing their goals with you, you can be inspired. So that's a little bit about setting goals. And now we're going to hear from our colleague, Tracy Sullivan.
Hi, everyone. This is Tracy. I hope everyone can hear me well. Again, I'm the grassroots manager at the COPD Foundation and work on the State Captains Program. And I'm going to tell you a story as well as hopefully gather up some discussion and some additional tips and sort of advice for achieving your goals. All right. So one of our state captains and volunteers, Debbie Darrow, has agreed to let me share her story. She is not on the line today, but she is one of our patients and advocates from New Jersey. And excitingly enough, she has also agreed to write a blog, which will be posted on the COPD Foundation Digest page in the next week or so. So you'll be able to hear a little bit more about her diagnosis journey and her building up of exercise. So definitely be on the lookout for that. So when me and Debbie spoke, she had a really inspirational story that I wanted to share. So when she was first diagnosed with COPD, she had sort of talked about how she felt weak and wasn't able to walk up the stairs, wasn't able to, she told me an example of a time when she was sitting in her living room and she was very thirsty but didn't want to go to the kitchen to fill up her glass of water because it was all the way across the house and she didn't feel like she had enough energy to do that. So Debbie talked with me and spoke about some of the goals that she wanted to set for herself to achieve different things in her life. So one of those goals was to carry 2 bags of groceries without getting out of breath from her car all the way into her house. She wanted to be able to climb up the stairs multiple times without having to stop. She wanted to be able to walk on a treadmill or use the bike machine for 5 to 10 minutes. And so she thought a lot about this and she utilized a lot of the skill sets that Jane and Stephanie talked about. So she got some, support and, help from a friend, another state captain, Jean Romes, who really encouraged her to start exercising. And so, like Jane said, she told somebody in her support group, and that made her feel more accountable and as well as supported. She also spoke with and sought out support from her respiratory therapy team. So she was able to get into a pulmonary rehabilitation program, and she was able to be in a safe environment to learn about new exercise trainings and skills, how to monitor her oxygen, how to know and push her limits, but in a safe way. So those were stepping stones to her goals. And once she finished pulmonary rehabilitation, she noticed that she was able to not only walk 5 to 10 minutes on a treadmill, she was actually able to move 20 minutes. And however, she felt like she still needed some more work with, being able to carry groceries. So what she did was that she signed up for a gym within the hospital and worked on strength training exercises with a trainer. And that enabled her to increase her strength, endurance, and energy. And through that, she was able to accomplish all of those goals. And very excitingly, she also reflected with me that she felt that she was stronger, had more endurance and energy than even prior to her diagnosis through after, achieving all of these things. So that's just another story that I wanted to share. And again, her blog posting, which will be longer, will also be on the site, so take a look. And I wanted to actually skip to the next slide very quickly, and then we'll go back to the stories from the community. But I wanted to add in some additional sort of resources or things that you can use to help you with your goals. So Jane also talked about COPD 360 Social, which I wanted to highlight again. If you haven't signed up yet or haven't been on our website, I would definitely take a look. This is a great community online forum that's very supportive. We have over 35,000 members. There are caregivers on there, other patients, healthcare professionals, and it's a great spot to find support. You can ask questions, you can post, after this, you can go on, make an account if you don't have one, post one of your goals. And it's a really great opportunity to get support from other people. And then also, hold yourself accountable to any of those goals and have people give you encouragement. I also provided some other resources. So for those of you who really enjoy, applications on your phone, there are a few apps that I have sort of looked at, but there are many, many out there on Google if you just go and Google goal setting apps. But a few of them are Stride, Habit Hub, and Fabulous Motivate Me. And with these, you can download them easily. You can type in your goals. They can give you ways to track your goals. Some of them have sort of inspirational quotes or things when you achieve. Some of them have coaches that can connect with you and motivate you. So if that's something you're interested, I would definitely take a look. Another thing is if you're less interested in sort of phone and technology, there's also some great resources out there for worksheets that you can print out on goal setting. So for example, I typed into Google and literally just typed in goal setting search. And I came up with a variety of really great templates that you can print out. You can, like Jane and Stephanie said, have a more thorough, what is your goal? What are the steps to get there? What support do you need? Things like that. That way you can print it out, write it, and have it somewhere in your house or your workspace that you can walk by, see it, and remember those goals. So those are a few things that I just wanted to draw attention to, but we'll go back to the original slide. Wonderful. And I wanted to also take this opportunity in a more informal setting and just have a discussion with people who are on the webinar and to share, if you could share with us, if you're interested in brainstorming, sort of what would you like to accomplish for this month or this year? What are some steps that you can think of right now to take to get there? Who do you need to help you? So we do have two individuals that have volunteered to sort of lead off the discussion. So we have John Lannell and Crystal Heiser, who are also both in our state captains program. So John is a wonderful advocate and patient of ours. Crystal is a respiratory therapist and an advocate from Delaware. So I am going to go ahead and find John's line and unmute him to share some things with us.
Thanks, Tracy. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I heard the little recording say that I'm unmuted, so I'm going to assume that I'm good to go. It's a pleasure to be here. I think as a patient, I want to look at COPD Awareness Month not only as a month where we try to spread education, spread awareness, encourage earlier diagnosis, talk to our legislatures, all of that stuff, but as far as goal setting and encouragement for ourselves, I think November is our new year. I mean, this is my new year where I'm going to make my COPD resolutions. And I think, personally, because we all have our own goals that we need to set, but, for me, I don't, even though I'm a state captain and I'm supposed to lead by example, I don't exercise as much as I should. And I know that I can't go out and run a marathon tomorrow, but I could certainly, for example, walk to the end of the driveway and back. So let's say I'll do that. Then the next day, I'll walk a little further and back, step by step. The old adage, we crawl before we walk before we run, and just so gradually increase what we're able to do. I know that both Stephanie and Jane addressed that earlier, but it's so true. Do what you can. Don't try to push it, but the next day, maybe another 5 feet. And pretty soon you're going to be walking circles around yourself and wondering how you got there. So I really think that November can be a new year because it's the COPD new year, at least for me. And that's my little tip and trick.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, John, for sharing that information with us and your inspiration and tips. It looks like Crystal unfortunately wasn't able to join us, but I would love to hear of others if you have any goals for the year or for this month or anything that you're thinking of, to click the raise your hand button, and that way we can unmute you and know if you are interested in speaking. There's also a chat button that you can type in something. So if you aren't comfortable speaking on the line, definitely feel free to type in a goal and we can read those out loud.
Tracy, I see Crystal's name on there. Would you like to go ahead and unmute her and give her a chance to speak?
Yes,
It just populated there? Okay.
Hi, Crystal.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm here.
Go ahead, we can hear
Hi,
you.
Crystal.
Yes, I'm here. I lost you for a minute.
So we are right now in the discussion question, just sort of talking about what are some goals for the year. And we'd love to hear from you sort of from an RT perspective about any goals that you have personally or for your patients and sort of tips on achieving those.
Okay, so first off, some of my own personal goals. I'm actually a respiratory therapy navigator at Bay Health Medical Center in Dover, Delaware. So some of my personal goals for myself are to become asthma educator certified, because not only are we serving the COPD population, but we're serving the whole pulmonary disease population, including asthmatics. So that's one of my own personal goals. But as far as patients go, I think when we do our daily visits, like patient to patient, everybody differs. So I kind of try to sit down with them to find out what their goals are. One of my goals for the patients, depending on if they qualify, is definitely the Pulmonary Rehabilitation Program. It's very helpful. We have one right here in the hospital. Both of our hospitals at Kent, in Kent County and Sussex County, both have pulmonary rehab programs, and they're both great programs that actually in the program have respiratory therapy education as well. So that's actually one of the biggest goals that we have. And then another goal that we have is we always ask, is the patient still smoking? So one of our biggest things is seeing the patient with smoking cessation. So as a navigator, we are also patient counselors. And that also is one of the goals for the patient. So I think that's probably my biggest goal to finish before the end of the year, is to become asthma educator certified. And then for patients, like I said, it's just a daily, every patient varies. I like to talk to them about what their goals are, and then I try to focus on helping them achieve that.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, it's really great to hear, so many positive messages about pulmonary rehabilitation and how it can really be supportive for people. So what we are going to do, it looks like I'm just going to check
Jan
to
has
see if
her hand raised.
Jan has her hand up.
I'm going to unmute Jan.
Okay.
She's self-muted, actually. Jan, if you can click on the phone icon or the microphone icon, and you'll have to unmute yourself there.
While she's doing that, I will just share that we got a comment in the questions box from Jimmy that says, I agree with John. Baby steps, it's the key, and you will eventually reach your goal and feel good about yourself. And I agree with you, Jimmy. I love also Jane's idea of stating the goal and breaking it down into those steps. It's, discrete components are much more achievable, right? We can all get closer when we do it that way. So thank you for your comment, Jimmy. And I think, Jan, you're there and live now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
You guys can hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Can
Yes,
you hear
we
me?
can hear you.
Oh, okay. First of all, I wanted to thank you so much for this webinar today. When I read Jane's article, it just warmed my heart, because with everything that has happened in my life in this past year, goal setting was nowhere near. I mean, it was almost like I was at a bottomless pit again, had gone back to pulmonary rehab, gone back to my pulmonologist and talked about getting back into pulmonary rehab, because all of these slings and arrows of life had just thrown me down. And the day that I read Jane's article, I just started walking through my house and saying, okay, Jan, let's set some of these goals that Jane's talking about. There were things that I had wanted to do, put some pictures on the wall, or go have lunch with my family, or go to a church service that I hadn't been able to go to in months and months and months. All of these different things that have happened to me. And I just think it is so wonderful. Like John said a few minutes ago, it's our new year. And I am going to take this COPD Awareness Month, November, as a new year for myself, to set goals that I need to do for myself. I think this is wonderful. I am going to completely spread this around to everybody that I know. And I'm just hoping and praying that it's going to work for me as far as exercising and getting myself mentally and physically back where I should be. Thank you guys for this. It's great. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jan. That was great. That's inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. I also see Orlin's hand is up. I'm going to try and unmute you now, Orlin, okay? And it also says that Orlin is self-muted. So if you can click the little icon that should be like a red microphone, Orlin, if you want to click that.
That'll work.
There we go. We hear you.
Okay. I'm a horrible one for goal setting. I either unconsciously set very small goals, like being able to go to the mailbox and come back, or get my own groceries, or go out and do something with my kids, and I don't think about them, or I set goals that are so huge that they're unaccomplishable. When I first became a COPD captain, one of the goals I set for myself was I wanted to start setting up health fairs. And in order to accomplish that, what I started doing was every time I found a health fair that was in the newspaper, I attended and found out who was in charge of it so that I could meet them and see if they would allow me to come in and set up a COPD booth. And it was baby steps. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I probably do 20, 25 health fairs a year. But in the beginning, it was a lot of being told no. or I fell through the cracks. I don't know what happened. They never called. I never made an impression for some reason. But eventually somebody called me and said, yeah, you can set up. And then next thing I knew, I had, 3 or 4 health fairs a year. And then after a while, it was, like I said, 20 to 25. So the big thing is when you set your big goal, you can't be disappointed if you just realize that there's little pieces of that big goal that you're good at, and then try to learn to get better at some of the others, whatever they might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Orlin.
Thank you,
I think that's
Orlin.
important to remember too, because sometimes we do find ourselves setting these great big goals, and they do feel like they're going to be really difficult to accomplish, but making goals that are achievable and then making the plan to get there, and then, like you said, just sticking to your plan, working your plan, that is a key. Are there any other questions, any other comments? Mm-hmm.
Just quickly to go back to something you said, I wrote it down verbatim, giving yourself permission to adapt. I just thought that was really genius. That spoke to me. So saying, okay, I might need to reframe this, right? I might not be in the same position I was a year ago, but okay, let's see how I can adapt so that I too can accomplish my goals and get the same things done maybe that I did before, or some version of them.
Right. I have found that phrase to be really helpful for people, to just recognize that maybe you are having to do things in a different way. Maybe the goals aren't what they would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but you know what? It's okay. We start where we are right now, and we give ourselves that permission. And I think it's very strong.
Yes, and that's a beautiful acceptance, I think, to give somebody, when oftentimes we can't do it for ourselves, right?
Right.
Okay. Oh, we have another hand up. So, Mary Ellen, we see you. And now your line is open if you'd like to speak. Are you there, Mary Ellen? No, we may have lost her. Okay. We have a few questions while we're waiting to see if other people would like to raise their hands. And so I just want to go back and pose a couple of these to the group. So one of the questions that we received was, one of my goals is to start exercising a bit more, and I live alone, so this presents a challenge. Is there a safe way for me to do that since I am by myself? So I'd like to pose that to the whole group of speakers. And how can you help this person? What information might you be able to equip them with? Thank you.
This is Jane. I would say at least have a cell phone with you at all times, so that you can, if something does happen, that you run out of breath or you fall or whatever, you can call for help. Even if a person can't walk with you, if it is walking, and there's other forms of exercise, of course, but if you would say to your support person, look, it's 7 p.m., I'm going to go outside and I'm going to walk for 15 minutes. I'll check back with you when I'm done. If you don't hear from me after 20 minutes, I'm walking down Main Street. Maybe you can come and see if I need help. And then you've got that accountability. You've got that like flight plan, and somebody knows you're out there instead of you just dashing out and nobody knows. That's one thought.
I would agree completely, Jane. I always like the idea, even for myself, even if I'm going to be out walking just through the neighborhood, I usually will text my daughter or my husband and say, okay, I'm out walking. If I go missing in action, this is where I was. But, I always like to have that as kind of a backup plan. But also, the first thing I would say is talk through all of this with your physician. Make sure that you have their blessing to get up and get moving. They may have some suggestions for you, things that they might think are appropriate for you to get started. There might be some exercises. What we used to encourage our patients to do were, we would call them commercial break exercises. I would encourage people to just get a couple of soup cans and keep them, maybe beside their chair in the living room. And during commercial breaks, those soup cans create about 1 pound, maybe a little less than a pound each. And you can actually do some arm exercises, just holding one can in each hand. Do some that way. That way you're still in your chair. You don't have the opportunity to injure yourself quite as much. So there are lots of different things that can be done to create a good exercise program for yourself, just with the things you have around the house. So you don't have to go out and spend money on weights and exercise bands and all of those types of things. You can really do quite a lot just at home. Like I say, even just sitting in your chair, leg lifts, ankle flexibility exercises, lots of things to get you started in the right direction of movement. So I think those things are important, but always talk to that physician first and make sure that you get their blessing.
Very true, Stephanie. And this is Jane again. You mentioned leg lifts, and that's something also, as you say, someone can do from the comfort of their chair. And we did this a lot in pulmonary rehab when we were doing our cool down exercises, just sitting up straight, holding your one leg at a time, holding your leg out and just holding it and holding it and holding it. Keep breathing, because you tend to kind of hold your breath when you're doing something that's a little bit strenuous, and you will build up leg muscles really fairly easily if you just keep up at this like every day for just a few minutes. And if you've got strength in your legs, you've got less of a chance to fall because you can pick your feet up better. You've got a little bit more balance. If you do some walking, these little things can help you have a better quality of life, or just keep the quality of life that you have in being able to move around.
Right, and muscle actually is more efficient in its oxygen use than, we'll call it non-muscle. I don't like to use the word that, but muscle tissue actually is more efficient in its oxygen uses. So the more muscle mass you have, the more efficient you can be with the oxygen you're able to receive from your supplemental oxygen, or if you're not there yet, just being able to use the oxygen you get from the air. So let's see.
Thanks. So we have a few comments on this topic in the questions box, which I think is probably what Stephanie's looking at too. We have one that says, very good point about talking to your doctor prior to doing any exercise. He or she may not want you overdoing it or may want limits on you in the beginning. So that's helpful for all of us, a good reminder. And then another note that reads, pulmonary rehab would be my first choice. So for needing access to exercise. And then I would say, if you don't have that choice, get a friend to walk with you and remember 3 things: your phone, your oximeter, and a bottle of water. Also good feedback. And then another comment, wanting to add that if having a bad day, it is okay to relax and chill for a day. Taking a small break when needed is really okay. And I think that we all need that permission sometimes, don't we? It's hard to give that to ourselves, but it's nice to be reminded of it. So let's see, any other questions? We have a few minutes left, so we could probably fit in one more question or comment. So please type that into the question box or raise your hand, and we can bring you onto the phone line.
Did you see Mary Ellen and Orlin have their hands raised? I will try to unmute Mary Ellen. There we go. Mary Ellen, can you hear us? Mary Ellen, can you hear us now? Okay. I'm going to move down and try to unmute Orland's line. And Orland, you'll have to unmute your microphone.
Is that better?
We hear you.
Okay. I would like to add that, anytime you're setting goals or exercising or doing anything, that no matter how crazy your idea is, this is how change comes about, is from crazy ideas. And just because you're having a hard time breathing doesn't mean that you don't have the best idea out there in the world to try and do something differently. Just because it's always been done a certain way doesn't mean that's the best way of doing it. That's all I got.
That's true. That's very true.
Very true.
Just because
yeah.
that's the way we do it doesn't mean it's the best way. That is so very true.
I have a question that I would like to, sorry. One question I'd like to pose to Jane and Stephanie, and that has to do with motivation. So say you have a goal that, may take months or years, or what are some tips or recommendations you have to have someone stay focused and motivated for a long-term goal?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tracy. I usually would encourage people to have a calendar, like an actual, like old school paper calendar that they can actually write things on, because I think those tangible experiences are pretty strong with us. We need to feel those connections. But I always encourage my patients to write down checkpoints along the way. And so, at 2 weeks, write a little note to yourself about the goal, to kind of check in and do a checkup about where am I with this goal? Do I need to adjust? Do I need to, adapt my plans? Am I on track? Am I ahead of schedule? Those types of things. So they would have those kind of reminders built into their calendar. And, as the goals go on and become a little bit, like you say, a little bit more detailed, a little higher level, you kind of stretch those out a little bit so that they give themselves plenty of time to reach the smaller goals that are held within those larger overarching ones. But the calendar really, really works.
Right. And
we have
related
about 60 seconds for another response. Go ahead, Jane.
Related to that, and Stephanie, your calendar idea is writing it down. And I thought back to when I worked in pulmonary rehab, how sometimes a participant in our program would compare themselves to someone else in the program and have a down day and say, I'll never be able to walk as fast as she can, or she doesn't seem to be having trouble like I do. And I would then say, look where you started. And I would take their chart, and maybe on that first day, we had some folks who walked only for 2 minutes on the treadmill, and they were pooped, and they were really short of breath. And then they would build up 1 minute each time they were there, and before you know it, you're walking 10 minutes at a time. So it's good to remind yourself where you started instead of comparing yourself to others, which you should never do, but remind yourself where you started and how far you've come, and that will give you motivation to continue on.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the speakers today and everyone on the line who joined us. Now, we're closing this conversation on the phone, but I would like to remind you, just as the people who are in the questions pane, you are not alone. Please come to COPD360social.org to continue the conversation about goal setting. We're going to move the conversation over there. And know that you'll be receiving an email from us. So that should be in the next few days. It will contain a link to the recording for this event. We'll also send you a very brief evaluation. You'll see a link, and you can fill out that evaluation online. And as I said earlier, you will get a link to info for the month of COPD Awareness Month, and as John said, our new year. So we want to thank you for being here again and wish you a great COPD Awareness Month, and we look forward to discussing your goals with you. Take care, everyone.